This video is about solving equations containing rational expressions. In this video, we're going to do it by finding the common denominator, and then we'll do it in another method in the next video, and that's using the common denominator to get rid of all the fractions. So in this video, though, we're going to get the common denominator in all of our fractions in order to solve these. And when you do that, after you have the common denominator, then you can just ignore the denominators and only look at the numerators. So our first example here is 4x over 5 minus 8 equals x. And our common denominator here is going to be the 5. We can rewrite the negative 8 as negative 8 over 1 and the x over 1 also. So what I need to do to the negative 8 to get the common denominator is multiply it by 5. The 4x already has the 5 in the denominator, so we don't have to do anything to that one. So we need to multiply this one by 5, and also the x has a 1 in its denominator, so we're going to need to multiply it by 5 as well. So we're going to have negative 40, 8 times 5, over 5, and that's equal to 5x over 5. And now you can just worry about the numerators since the denominators are all the same. So we have 4x minus 40 equals 5x. And I'm just going to subtract the 4x from both sides. And so 5x minus 4x is x, and it's equal to this negative 40. And then when you're solving rational equations, you always want to take a look at what you got for x, go back to your original equation, and make sure that whatever you got for your answer, here it was negative 40, isn't going to end up causing you to divide by 0 when you replace the negative 40 with x. And that won't happen here. We didn't have any x's in our denominators to begin with, and so our negative 40 will be just fine. Example B, x plus 5 over 4 plus x plus 5 over 2 equals x over 8. This time, the common denominator is 8. 8 is the smallest thing that all three of these denominators will divide evenly into. In order for us to get an 8 in the denominator of the first fraction, we're going to have to multiply that by a 2. So we also need to multiply that numerator by a 2. To make this 2 into an 8, we have to multiply it by 4, so I also need to multiply that second numerator by 4, and then the last fraction already has the 8 in the denominator, so we can just leave it alone. What we have here then is 2 times the quantity x plus 5, plus 4 times the quantity x plus 5, and it's equal to x. And all of these were over 8. And because all of them are the same, we only need to worry about our numerators again. Now we want to distribute the 2, giving us 2x plus 10. Then distribute the 4, giving us 4x plus 20. And this is equal to x. We want to combine our like terms. 2x and 4x is 6x. And 10 and 20 is 30, so we get 6x plus 30 equals x. Now we want to gather up all the x's on one side and the constants on the other, so I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. And x minus 6x is negative 5x, and that's equal to 30. And the last step, we have to divide both sides by negative 5. So we get x is equal to negative 6. And again, this original didn't have any x's in its denominators, and so our solution will work just fine when we plug it in for x. Example C is 4 over x minus 4 plus 4 over 2x minus 8 equals 6. This time, our common denominator, We need to factor a 2 out of the 2x minus 8. That will leave us with 2 times the quantity x minus 4. And the 6, remember, we can write over 1. And so our common denominator is going to be 2 times x minus 4. To get that denominator in the first fraction, we would have to multiply by 2. So we're going to multiply both the top and the bottom of that by 2. That will give us 8 over 2 times x minus 4. And that was plus. And this denominator already has our common denominator, so we don't have to do anything to it. And then that's equal to, and the 6 doesn't have anything in its denominator but a 1, so we have to multiply it by the 2 and the x minus 4. Now that all these denominators are the same, we can just think about the numerators. And 8 plus 4 is 12. So we get 12 is equal to, and 6 times 2 is 12. So we have 12 is equal to 12 times the quantity x minus 4. Distributing this 12 gives us 12 equals 12x minus 48. And then we have to add 48 to both sides. That gives me 12x is equal to 60, and then divide both sides by 12. That gives us x is equal to 5. Just do a quick little visual check. Will that 5 cause us to divide by 0 anywhere? And the answer is no, and so this solution will work. This next example, negative 5x over 3x plus 3 equals 2x over 6x plus 6 plus 6x minus 4 over x plus 1. So our first denominator, we can factor a 3 out. That would leave us with 3 times the quantity x plus 1. And the second denominator, we can factor out a 6, giving us 6 times the quantity x plus 1. Our common denominator, so we need a 6. That's what both 6 and 3 will divide into, and it's the smallest thing. And then we also need an x plus 1. This first fraction has 3 times x plus 1, so all I'd have to multiply this by to get the 6 times x plus 1 is 2. So we're going to multiply that by 2, and whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top, so we're going to multiply that top by 2 as well. And negative 5x times 2 is negative 10x. And then our second fraction, we have 2x over 6 times x plus 1, and so that already has our common denominator. Plus 6x minus 4 is over x plus 1, so what's missing there from our common denominator is the 6. So we're going to multiply both the top and the bottom of this by 6. So that's 6 times the quantity 6x minus 4 over 6 times x plus 1. Now that all these denominators are the same, we can just use the fraction. Sorry, not the fraction. We can just look at the numerators. That gives us the equation negative 10x equals 2x plus, and we can distribute this 6 right here, so that gives us plus 36x minus 24. Combining any like terms, we have negative 10x, we have a 2x here and a 36x, so that's 38x, and that's minus 24. Now I want to subtract 38x from both sides. That gives me negative 48x equals negative 24. And then we have to divide both sides by negative 48. That gives me x is equal to 1/2. Again, do a quick visual check. The only thing that would cause us to divide by 0 from our common denominator is a -1, and that's not what we got, so this solution will work just fine. This next example, 2t plus 3 over t minus 1 minus 2 over t plus 3 equals 5 minus 6t over t squared plus 2t minus 3. So we have to factor this denominator. It factors as t plus 3 times t minus 1. We need to find our common denominator. And so write down the first part, the denominator of the first fraction, t minus 1. And then our second fraction is t plus 3, so that's different, so I need to add it. And then we need to find one more thing, or look at one more thing. In our last fraction we had t plus 3 and t minus 1, and so those we have already, and so we don't need to add anything new. Now, the 2t plus 3 over t minus 1 was missing the t plus 3, so we have to multiply that 2t plus 3 by t plus 3 minus, we would have 2 times what's not there, and that's the t minus 1. And it equals, this one had both of them, so we just need the 5 minus 6t. So again, we can put each of these terms over the common denominator now that we have it, but we're just going to ignore them anyways, so we might as well just leave them gone. Now we need to do FOIL here. 2t times t is 2t squared. 2t times 3 is plus 6t. And 3 times t is plus 3t. And then 3 times negative 3, nope, that's a positive 3, is 9. Now we need to distribute the -2. That gives me negative 2t plus 2, and it's equal to 5 minus 6t. Gather up our like terms. Oops. We have 2t squared, and there isn't any other t squared term. And then we have 6t and 3t, that's 9t. Minus 2 is 7t. And last but not least, we have 9 and 2, which is 11. This is a quadratic because we have t squared here. That means we need to gather up everything on one side of the equation and have 0 on the other side of the equation. So I need to subtract the 5 from both sides and add the 6t. When we do that, we end up with 2t squared plus 13t, and that would be plus 6. And now it's equal to 0. So now I need to determine whether I can factor this. The only way for me to factor 2t squared is 2t and t. And we can factor 6 in 2 ways, 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So let's try the 1 and 6. When we would do FOIL, that would give me 1t or t, and the outers would give me 12t. And we can use those to make a positive 13t. We would need both of these to be positive to get the 13t, and also we needed both of them to be positive because our 6 is positive. And this is equal to 0, so either 2t plus 1 equals 0, or t plus 6 equals 0. Subtract 1 from both sides gives you 2t equals -1. Then we would divide by 2, so we would have left t is equal to -1/2. Now for the other side, we would subtract 6 from both sides, giving us t equals -6. And do a visual check. Will -6 or -1/2 cause us a problem? And the answer is no. Here's my least common denominator, and the only things that won't work here are 1 and negative 3. We need to factor the m squared minus 25. That factors as m plus 5 times m minus 5. And then we need to find our common denominator. So write your first denominator down, that's m plus 5. And look at the second denominator, and it's different, so we need to add it, the m minus 5. And then looking at the last denominator is m plus 5 times m minus 5, which is what we have already, and so our common denominator is m plus 5 times m minus 5. Now we want to get the common denominator in all of our fractions. The part that's missing from our common denominator in the first fraction is m minus 5. So we'll have negative 2 times the quantity m minus 5. And that's going to be over our common denominator, m plus 5 times m minus 5. And then minus 3, and the second denominator is missing the m plus 5, so we'll multiply that by m plus 5. And that's over our common denominator, m plus 5 times m minus 5. And it's equal to 15, and the 15 already has the common denominator, so we don't need to multiply it by anything. Now that the denominators are the same, we can just look at the numerators. Distributing the negative 2 gives us negative 2m plus 10. Distributing the negative 3 gives us negative 3m minus 15, and that's equal to 15. Combining like terms, we have negative 2m and negative 3m, so that's negative 5m. 10 and negative 15 is negative 5, and it equals 15. Now we want to add 5 to both sides. That gives us negative 5m equals 20, and then we need to divide both sides by negative 5. This gives us m is equal to negative 4. Do a quick little check. The only things that weren't going to work for us were either a positive 5 or a negative 5, and so our m minus 4 will work just fine. That concludes our lecture on solving rational equations by finding a common denominator. Let me know if you have any questions.